For those who have not had the pleasure of formally meeting, I'm Scott Schamberger, and it's my distinct pleasure to serve as head of school at Indian Springs, and for those alums in the room as the director. One of the distinct characteristics about Springs egalitarian community is a shared governance model. We run a township, and participatory citizenship is a core value of this place. Mayors at Springs are the keepers of the culture and have always played an important role in navigating the various challenges that school communities face. I'm really excited about this panel, maybe even slightly apprehensive though. To our current students, I will just remind you that just because you hear about the folklore of the past doesn't mean it is appropriate for today or tomorrow. It is my distinct honor to introduce our moderators of the mayor's panel, two members of the class of 2025, fall 2024 Mayor Edward Davis, and our current Springs Mayor, Ibrahim Ahmed.
Hey everyone, Ibrahim here. First, I'd like to thank you all for being here, and I'd like to thank all of our previous mayors for being on this panel. Thank you guys so much. And also, I'd like to thank Dr. Wright and Mr. Pearson, two key members of our arts department, for setting this all up. So if you guys would like to start off with this first question. We have here is tell us a little bit about yourself. So what you're working on currently, your name, anything interesting you'd like to share. If you guys want to go down the line from youngest to oldest first.
My name is Sarah Croonan, Sarah Abrams Croonan, my maiden name, and I was class of '04. I was the spring mayor of class of '04. And a little bit about ourselves. The bio's in there, so you can read that. But I'll jump to currently I am a primary care physician here in Birmingham. I have 3 small children, and that's for most of my day.
All right, Randall Miner, class of '99. I was spring mayor as well. I'm a lawyer, do community and economic development. A lot of what I do is in Birmingham, a lot of it is throughout the Southeast. Interesting thing to share, until this panel, I didn't realize that there were like 4 folks that I regularly interacted with in the community that were also mayors. Nobody kind of sound like a mayor's badge or whatever.
Yeah, Mike Goodrich. Ray is my godfather. That's my interesting fact. But I did not know he was his fellow mayor. He may have told me that back in the 90s. I should have known. But I am 1990. I was a fall mayor. I have 3 kids who have been, one who is still here, Andrew, and then Gibson and Catherine attended. My wife is on the board, chair of the board, and I've been on the board. So it's a long time here. I run a fund that invests in life sciences in Birmingham. So that has been an interesting twist from the law world that I started in.
Allison Goldstein Levovitz. It's not even my reunion weekend, but I live in Chattanooga, so I drove 2.5 hours to be on this panel for an hour, and I have to be back for a meeting at 6:30. So that's how much I love Indian Springs, and that's how much I love being mayor and love just being on this campus. You will feel that when you leave, that you are going to want to come back at every opportunity, and those opportunities don't present themselves as often as possible. I host a show for PBS, an interview show. I run a nonprofit, and I have a podcast with my sister, who went here for 2 years, Amanda. This is her reunion weekend, and Amy Finkelstein suggested she come back, so she is Saturday night. So, sis and tell, but thanks for having us. This is great.
Hello, I'm Robert Allen, co-mayor, and I were mayors the same year. We finished in '80. We just discussed the neither of us can remember who was the fall or spring mayor. So there's that. And I do want everyone to look at my photograph in the handout. My hair looks fabulous. And I'm wearing a Finance Pro vest. So I want y'all to know that I really created that model for the Finance Pro, even though I'm not a Finance Pro. I love Springs. My brother finished here in '75. I have a lot of nieces and cousins that went here, and I'm honored to be on the stage today.
Yes, as Robert just indicated, we could not remember whether we were spring or fall mayors, but I'm Tomei Matisse, I'm class of 1980. I'm 2 days removed from turning 64, so this is my 45th reunion. And I'm originally from Brazil. I was 6 years removed from immigrating with my parents, and I remember Dr. Stegner's class and him always handing me New York Times and saying, Mr. Matisse, make sure English is your priority while it springs. I remember the picture also that Robert mentioned in this book. I remember studying for Dr. Watkins' chemistry exam, and I'm sure my mother still has that sweater at the house. So very nice to be here, and thank you all.
Rusty Rushton, class of 1974. Was not an awesome student here. I got picked in shows what I had discipline for, but became an academic. I spent the last 25 years, up until 2 Junes ago, helping to administer an honors program at UAB, where I also lecture and taught seminars in literature. Got 2 children who are no longer children. They both lived here and loved it. My daughter Tulia was mayor also. And my wife, who's a Rhode Islander, who would have thought, is going to take Mike's wife's place as the board chair starting this summer, I guess. And I think that's about it for him. Yeah.
I'm Mike Nichols. I'm class of 70, was the fall mayor. I'm here with my wife, Marcia Nichols. We've been married 49 years. I think Springs is a good place to begin long marriages. Because we really do believe we have learning through living, and that's kind of what marriage is all about. We have 4 children, 2 PhDs, 1 MD, and 1 who's the smartest, doesn't have the advanced degree. We live in Houston, Texas, and one of the things that being mayor did for me was it made me feel like I could do anything in the world. And at 24 years old, I got elected to the Georgia legislature thinking if I was mayor of Indian Springs, that's nothing. And throughout my life, that's really been what's been behind this, that I could figure out things as I got along. And at the age of 72, thinking I was going to retire, I became the director of housing for the city of Houston, knowing nothing about the department, knowing nothing about, not much about real estate, and it's been a learning experience. So again, Springs was the basic basis for me in everything I do about learning through living.
I'm Greg Wassel, table in charge here. Graduated in 1963, 8th class, I guess. And was mayor spring of 62. At least at that time, the choice about when you wanted to be mayor, you didn't really understand why one might be better than the other. But what I discovered is that after being mayor, I had 1 more semester that I could really cut up and not behave, which I did. Indian Springs has seemingly been a part of my life ever since in some way, shape, or form. It's been already noted. I have a grandson, Edward, who was mayor. I have a godson who didn't know that I was mayor. I served 15 years on the Indian Springs board. I was its chairman for 6 years. And, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to remember anything worth talking about.
All right, well, thank you all for introducing yourself a little bit there. I just wanted to echo what Abe said a second ago. Thank you to all of you for being here. It's great experience to get to know all of you and hear from you guys. We'll start back down at the end again with another question. Some of you already touched on this a little bit, but what were you like as a spring student? What were you involved in? What were some of the things that you did either good or bad?
a student in Indian Springs is being able to be in so many different extracurriculars. And I have a decent list, but I did choir and soccer and basketball and drama. I was involved in what was called the Heritage Club at the time, as well as recycling, judiciary, student government. I think this place really allowed me as a teenager, as a high school student, to explore a lot of things, which was helpful to give me confidence in the next stage of my life.
Yep, co-sign all of that. I mean, I think the thing I think about Indian Springs is, where else could you be the student government president and play on the basketball team, play on the soccer team, also on the debate team. But that doesn't happen in most places. And that's really the key that I would learn about Indian Springs, just the ability. There weren't that many people, relatively speaking, but the ability to really go and get involved in everything and not be as competitive as other places.
I agree with that, although I definitely was not a hard worker. But I play basketball, and if I can't play basketball now, I probably really couldn't play that well then. Coach Van Horn probably regrets having me on the team, but you still needed a team of 5 to play. So I got to play, and I did acting. I love that. I love being in student government, and so just being around so many smart people is one of the things I really take away from here that I love so much, including Allison.
We were in school together. All right, so you don't care what I did. Here, I'm going to tell you a story. So I went to the Birmingham Jewish Day School, and I graduated, and in 7th grade I graduated, and I said, I'm going to Mountain Brook School. I'm going to public school now because I was the only girl in my graduating class of 5, and it was a little socially isolating, to say the least. And my parents said, no, you're going to apply to Indian Springs, and if you get in, you're going to go. And I said, no, I'm not. And I got in, obviously. And they said, you are going to go. And I said, I am not going. And they made me go. And I don't exactly remember that. Here's what I do remember. After day 5, I came home. And my parents said, how's it going? I said, I would really like to be a boarding student and just live there and never come home. And my dad said to me in 8th grade, first week of school, well, if you become mayor of Indian Springs, we will consider letting you board. And I became the fall mayor, so I got elected my junior year, and I said, okay, pony up, dude. And he didn't let me board, but he did, you could do this back then, he did, now you can't, because I think there's triples now, because there's so many boarding students. He did let me and my best friend Elise May, and her parents let her board for 2 weeks, our spring semester. So I was both a day student and a boarding student in Indian Springs because I became mayor. That's a true story.
See why you're a successful podcaster. And that's a hard way to learn your dad can't tell the truth. I'm sorry about that. I was a 30 or 40 percentile student here, and given it's true, Peggy knows that, and given the caliber of folks like Tomei and my friend John Abbott and others that went to Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, I felt pretty good about that. And I learned a lot. I learned not to be intimidated by really smart people. I learned to listen. I tell the folks I work with that the less I speak, the smarter I sound. And that's true. I listen and I learn. And I listened to John Abbott, who's in the audience, who was very helpful in getting me through AP Calculus and Dr. McCoss. I learned how to value folks who are very different from me, the way they look, and the way they act, and the things they do, and to be very tolerant. I guess that's probably the most important thing that came out of my education here. And one other thing, and I witnessed it again today with Mr. Landrum, I learned that great teachers are the kind that when you come back to school and you see a teacher, and I've heard that across the way, the teacher looks at a former student and beams like he or she is looking at a grandchild and sharing in the success and loving the future that they have helped create for their students. It really brings me joy. And the teachers here do that. They did it then, whether it's Dr. Lacasse or Mr. Landrum, with Dr. Cooper, and I was his worst student ever. But and he would tell you that too. These teachers really love us, and your teachers love you. And when you come back in 20 years, whether you're a Indian chief, a cobbler, a baker, or who knows what, they're going to be proud of you for what you've done if you've done something that fulfills you and that drives you. And that's kind of what Springs is about for me.
I remember distinctly here at Indian Springs, I was a boarding student all 4 years. The experience, as I see boarders today, was just life-changing, really. I remember I played soccer all 4 years, and we were new in welcoming women to the campus, and so I think we had women on the soccer team, so that was just phenomenal. I mean, women that you really interacted with and you respected and each other, and we grew together, so that was magnificent. But I remember a distinct memory walking back from a soccer practice, and one of my teammates said, are you trying out for the choir, the glee club at the time? And I had no idea of even that a tryout was being held or an invitation, but really it set in motion a lifelong love for music. So I participated in the choir all 4 years, and that in itself speaks volumes for my friend Jim Shine. So I think that in itself, you'll see classmates that will pull you along in different experiences, and that to me was a moment that I remember. And in this picture, I remember dutifully studying for this chemistry exam in Dr. Watkins' class and just praying that I was going to get through the exam. And I had people stop me into the rooms to say, how are things going? And the exam turned out fine, so that was great. But the experience itself, boarding, if you're a day student, spend as much time on the campus because the time will go pretty quickly, but you'll remember it 45 years later like it was today.
When I was at the age to come to New Springs, I had my dad and mother had taken me on a tour of New England prep schools. My dad had gone to Exeter and with some of the other men his age at that time. So I did that tour, and it just felt very alien to me. But I was probably destined to, I was enrolled in a school called St. Andrews in Wilmington, Delaware. It was beautiful. It had lakes, kind of like in New Springs. And something put an idea in my dad's head. I've never asked him when he's deceased now, but I have a feeling it was all the stories about drugs and young people, and that he really wanted his son to be 400 miles away or whatever it was going to be. So I remember hearing his saying, should we just look at Indian Springs? And I kind of, well, okay. And, I forget what happened after that, but I ended up coming here and wasn't looking forward to it with any great anticipation particularly. I'd been at the Mountain Junior High, and I had good friends there, played on sports teams, etc. And my first night here, I fell in love with the place. I was a boarding student, and just within a half hour, I could just tell, just something I felt. As I've already said, I was not an awesome student, but I was very alive to the world of ideas, and wouldn't have known that really, except for the fact that I was here among other fellow students who were that way also. And I just remember so many long conversations with close friends, and then occasionally people that weren't in my pack. And so that by the time I went to Vanderbilt, there are ways in which I encountered students that were more mature than I in various ways, and we grow in different ways. But socially, in terms of being thoughtful about life, I felt like I was around children in a way. I really just, I'd already sort of been so thoughtful about so many things, and I really owe that to here. I'll say something about Glee Club too, since Tony mentioned it. I had no intention of being in the choir. My roommate, Charlie Cox, his older brother, Robbie, had a beautiful voice in the choir, and Charlie knew that he was going to be in choir, so when they came around, soliciting people to come see if they could hum My Country 'Tis of Thee and stay in tune, I went along and did it. But I remember, if I'd said the word Glee Club at the Mountain Junior High, that would not have enhanced my popularity. It might have even endangered me. I adored Glee Club, and I adored everything about the school, frankly. And just, it was a very, very happy time for me. And I know it has to play an important role when you're in such formative years, when you really feel supported by the school. And I identified with the school. I was proud to be here, and I felt that way ever since. And I did serve on the board also for 14 years before when I got off, they realized maybe we can get his wife to come on now, and that's a better choice. But anyway,
Well, I just want to admit that I was one of the 30 or 40 boys here who couldn't hum. My country doesn't. So that's still true of me. My overall feeling about coming to Indian Springs was I felt very fortunate, felt very lucky. I'd gone through the Mountain Brook schools too, and my parents moved to Atlanta when I was going into 9th grade, and I was placed in a school there called Westminster, which was a very unhappy place for me because it's so strict, it's so competitive. And so when I show up in 10th grade at Indian Springs, it was just like finding my people. And I felt so lucky to find my people as a 15-year-old instead of having to wait for such a long time. And the unfortunate part is I felt like I got a more important education here and a better education than I got at Brown or Emory Law School, and it carried me all the way through. My experience here was I was very into student government beginning right when I got here. We had all the freshmen and sophomores vote together for the first group of underclassmen to sit on the Judiciary Committee, and had a big block vote, and there was a lot of excitement and throwing in the lake as a result of that. You know, when I became Commissioner of Education, I wanted to bring speakers here. We had our United States Senator who said he would never come back to Indian Springs. He felt so mistreated, and we were proud of that. And it was a fun time and a place to be when you wanted to be a little different. So I got a chance to speak at the anti-war moratorium in Birmingham because that's what Indian Springs students did. It was a great place to be progressive and thoughtful, and I loved my friends here, still love them. And it was such an important thing to me that carried me on, even as I said right now, as I'm trying to do new things and take writing courses, it's still learning through living.
Like Robert, I was in the half that made the top half possible. Consistently, most of my life. You understand it's a very important half. Without us, the rest of you folks wouldn't look so good. Life as a student, I was a day student. When I went to Indian Springs, about 130 students. 100 of them, it was all boys. I hate to say male, boys would be much more accurate. And I was a day student. There were about 30 of us, maybe 25 or 30, enough to fill up one bus. And I started life as a day student. On the second day I was here, the seniors threw me in the shower at the old gym. And I went home and said, my parents said, how'd you like it? I said, well, I'm not feeling real good about it so far. And a little later on, that freshman year, I found out I was not nearly as smart as I thought I was. Nor did my parents. And the rest of my 3 years was spent clawing my way back from that realization. I enjoyed being a day student, but we were in the minority. And we'd get on the bus every morning. It would occasionally break down. I changed tires twice. It broke down regularly. But it was all a lot of fun. And so when I was approaching being a senior, I said, well, maybe I should be a boarding student as well, and I need that experience. I was a scholarship student, so I went to see Dr. Armstrong, and I said, I'd like to board. And he took a few puffs on his pipe, and said, well, I'm not sure why I should let you do that. show me something. So I went and got elected mayor. Went back to him and said, Doc, can I board now? He said, well, I guess. Again, the bottom half is you know, it's hard. My experience in Indian Springs, barring that first year, which was fairly traumatic, I loved English history, not so good in math and science. Loved the Glee Club. The Glee Club was a status thing, as some of you have noted. If you were in, you got to make these trips in the spring. If the other people didn't get to make. Little did I know they would have a lot of fun here. And I played sports. We didn't have football, still don't, and I wasn't much good at any of them. In fact, played basketball. I played basketball awkwardly as only a fat guard can do. But I had a great time at it. Indian Springs obviously had an impact on me because I've been able to let go of it for some reason. So I'm still happy to be around and still happy to be here. I ultimately became an architect. I designed this building, by the way, whatever that's worth. But that's not really necessary. What I wanted to say was that it was one of the more meaningful things I've ever done as an architect, was design this building, which was a special place, and we called it the town hall now, because it replaced the old town hall. And it's fun for me to come sit.
So, my grandfather neglected to tell one story about his time in sports here, which has been recounted to me countless times. When I first told him I was joining the baseball team, he gave me a not great stare and a confused look, and I said, why? What's wrong? He said, I had to leave the baseball team after my junior year, and I said, why? He said, well, they forgot to turn the pitching machine off, and I was the catcher, and I stood up to do whatever he had to do. The balls were still flying out of the pitching machine. One knocked me right on the head, and that was my last day of baseball ever. My playing baseball here did not come as a welcome thing to him at first, but it ended up working out. So, we're going to ask y'all a third question here, and so going forward, we're just going to kind of go around. You can say if you'd like to answer, whoever wants to go, we'll pass the microphone along from there. Our third question is, what was your time as mayor like? What are some things you remember? If there's anything special, stories, anything you learned in particular, you'd like to share with us.
Mike?
Make some thoughts. Not quite as profound as some of the other wonderful things you all have been saying. Let's see. So one thing I thought was very interesting about being elected mayor. As I've answered my questions so far, I was very formal. And luckily the school lets you try twice to be mayor. In my first speech, I was very formal. And I thought I was a great candidate for the position. And the person who beat me sang a song as his speech, and he won. So I learned the second time around that I needed to be a little more interesting. And I think I've been listening to y'all's stories, and you learn here the practice, learning through living, and like how to, just through experiencing, what's going to get the other people interested, and what's going to get you successful in achieving your goals. So I made my speech much more entertaining, and then I won the speech. So I thought it was just an interesting moment. I will say, I think the speeches, there may have been some rules about speeches after mine. So I won't share it today. And then the other thing, I guess one accomplishment I feel like I had as mayor, and I'll tell you, I really don't remember much because it was the spring, but I remember making sure the speeches, again, were run on time, because I remember they would always drag on when I was here. So I was very proud of the fact that we finished on time and everyone got to go to lunch early.
The only thing I really remember about was two things I remember. One is we had our town halls in I think we were the first class. Kevin, y'all were not in this building, right?
No.
Yeah, so we were the first class that was in this building. So we had our town halls in the room right over there. And every Monday, I made it my goal to have entertaining community events as part of the town hall. And so it was kind of like, part of the fun. I remember Indian Springs was in French class, and we was really doing a lot of classes where we got to do skits. So I kind of made it that sort of thing. So like every Monday there was some skit that we did. And it was really more, really to entertain myself, to be honest. But it also was a kind of community building thing. And so that was the thing I remember the most. And I think you had a question about what would you do differently. And I think the only thing I would do differently is, I think it kind of goes back to that elections thing, just everything is student run, or at least it was when I was here, which is good and bad. Like the bad is get like really bad yearbook photos, like mine, for example. But the good is you really learn, you get the exposure, you get the leadership training, all of those things. And so I think the only thing I would do differently is maybe have more manuals for the next mayor, especially when it comes to like the mechanics of the speeches and how you actually do the elections. That was literally just kind of made up. So.
I guess what I remember about, I don't remember much about my term, which I think means not too much happened, which I think means it was somewhat successful. I remember thinking that I was going to redo the Constitution, because I think that's what every mayor thinks they're going to do. And I also remember not doing that. So I learned the lesson of not overcommitting. Well, I didn't learn that lesson. I keep learning that lesson the wrong way. But and then I remember I tried to get elected in my junior year between us, but I had written an article in the paper that irritated I gave all the seniors a gift, and it was extremely offensive. It probably would have got me kicked out today. And so I lost that entire vote, and so I didn't get elected as commissioner. So one, I needed to wait till they all graduated. And then two, it's a little Machiavellian, but you do need a majority of people liking you to be mayor or thinking you're a good mayor, and you've got to be respectful of all the people here. So that was my lesson learned.
First of all, our town hall meetings were on the floor of the gym, and I think you should bring that back. That was fun. Second, I ran junior year, I think one of 7 candidates. I was the only female, and one of the other guys running came up to me in the library, I remember it, and said, you should really consider dropping out because you don't have a chance. And that just fueled me more, and then it ended up being a runoff between me and I think Wilson Green, and I won. Third, the platform I ran on was very lofty goals back then. We had a gravel parking lot near the admin building at the time, and I ran, at the top of my platform was we were gonna get that paved. And one of the seniors, because I was a junior, Monty Tavicoli, I think his brother might be here. David, are you here? Heard you're here somewhere. Okay. So Ronnie wrote a scathing article about all the mayor's platforms, including and especially mine, and like, what kind of leadership is this that only cares about, paving gravel lots? And I will just say, looking at campus today, I was really a pioneer, because there is like asphalt beyond the horizon. So let it be known that in 1987, I had a dream. I'm just really touched that it came true today.
I don't remember much about my tenure as mayor. One thing, and I really just thought about it while I was trying to come up with something to say, was the graduation speech. Tomei and I each gave speeches. And as a 17-year-old, I didn't think it was appropriate to talk about my life experiences so much, because I really hadn't had many, and I couldn't get one of these, reach for the stars kind of things that you see. So what I talked about was Dudley McGuire, and for the old timers, Dudley McGuire was kind of the lead handyman here. And I was very close to Dudley McGuire, Leo King, who worked in Mr. Watkins' class, was a lab assistant and bus driver, and Fred. Fred was a obese night watchman and I believe diabetic. Jack, right? Jack. Hammerhead. And I loved them all. Dudley, Mr. McGuire, to me, was in a car accident and died. The Glee Club sang at his funeral service. And the reason I talked about him at the graduation was, one, he was always very kind to me. And two, he took such pride not only in the students here, but in the work that he did, some of which was rather manual in nature. But I loved the guy. And I guess I dedicated the graduation speech to Mr. McGuire. And his steady presence here, seeing him by the bus shed, and I was walking around the lake or watching him, fix something around the campus, was just a very steady hand over my 5 years here when I started the first 8th grade class. So I don't think I accomplished anything. I'm sure I didn't accomplish anything great in my time as mayor, but those three guys made a pretty big impression on me, particularly Mr. McGuire.
Yeah, I think after this panel's over, Robert and I may just flip a coin to decide whether we were spring or fall mayor and go from there. But I do distinctly remember, again, 6 years removed from immigrating from Brazil, I didn't know the difference between equal rights or civil rights, and we all looked at each other and said we all have to make this work, and we ended up all loving each other, and it was quite a humbling experience. But I do remember, not so much as mayor, but preceding that, being commissioner of recreation, actually, and one of my roles was to figure out what to do with some boarding students. So I had the idea of taking a 74 Suburban that was on campus at the time. It was orange and gray panel. I sometimes would obviously put some phone books on the seat, and students who were daring enough, we would take them through Birmingham to do shopping or to the fairgrounds. And I remember my promise to each one was to bring them back alive. So they took the chance, and sometimes we would have a handful, sometimes we would have the Suburban jammed. The fairgrounds, I remember, we went in the evening and it was late when we came back. I always made sure the tank was filled in the Suburban. So that was a great experience. But great people, and we still indirectly keep in touch. So you'll have friendships that will last your lifetime.
Boy, was I relieved in the minutes leading up to this event that my colleagues to the left and right didn't necessarily remember so well what they did as mayor either. I was last night thinking, why, make something up. So I don't remember so much about that. I do remember a couple of things. One was I was involved in bringing speakers in. I'm sure I wasn't alone in doing that, but one that was prompted by, I think, my dad and me, because it was of interest to all our parents and to ourselves too. Brought in someone, a scholar, a scientist, to talk about drugs, and it was interesting. It was about warnings, but also sort of disinterested about the science and psychology of the things that were being passed around, so to speak. I don't think that lecture changed any of the recreational disposition of ourselves necessarily, but it was interesting. I think the legacy that I remember is, I do think it was my idea to have a water balloon battle with the whole school. And so I know that my fellow officers and I filled up water balloons on one very kind of sunny, cool, maybe I think fall day, and set them up. And like a lot of things, it took about a lot of build up and it was over in about 5 minutes. But it made great photographs. If you look at the 1974 yearbook, there's a spread on just that. You think, boy, what a school to go to. I think the thing that I did enjoy most about being mayor was representing the school and standing up to introduce speakers and giving that last day graduation talk with, I guess it would have been Alan Campbell, if I was going to be here today. I did enjoy representing the school, both here and where I lived at home. And, all my friends I'd grown up with that didn't go here, they knew what I felt about Indian Springs. Some of them might have thought it was obnoxious, but I did love that part of it. It didn't require being mayor to be an ambassador to the school. I think a lot of Springs students graduates end up being ambassadors for the school, and I certainly have tried to be my whole life.
So 1969, 1970 was a time of turmoil with the colleges closing as a result of the Vietnam War, and they had a sense of the outside coming into Indian Springs during my tenure. And looking back, and just as I sit here thinking, the guy I ran against was, I would say, a cynic. And he was cynical about this whole student government thing, and I was serious about community and developing community. You had to be nice to the freshmen, and you shouldn't throw people in the showers, and you shouldn't make fun of Jack the Night Watchman. And that was like kind of a serious thing. And what's funny about it, I still think I'm that way. And I still feel like I'm spending a lot of time fighting cynicism and trying to make people believe government can work. And it's interesting. 55 years later, you had that same feeling about things. And Indian Springs really was, in many ways, a great community. Not utopian, but a really good community where you had to work at making a community.
I couldn't remember either. I found, however, a collection, Alan Cruz and I were talking about it a moment ago, of old Indian Springs newspapers. A newspaper called the Isinfo. And I found somehow a copy of the Isinfos from 59, I think, through maybe 63, which was basically my tenure when I was here. And I found the article when my commission got elected, and a picture of all of us and so forth. And I said, oh, great, maybe it'll tell me something about what we did. No such luck. It only quoted my classmate Hardeman Mead, who ran a skillful campaign for Commissioner of Recreation. And the only quote worthy of that campaign apparently was, I wrote it down because I can't remember anything. Teenagers know best what type of recreation they like, and the faculty cannot handle it. Perhaps I'll leave it.
So, thank you guys. I think a lot of your experiences definitely resonate with the current student body. Coming from Indian Springs and sort of interacting with other high schoolers and high school graduates, it's definitely a different feeling knowing that you graduated from Springs and you got to experience this amazing community. We do have one more question, and so that would be, is there any defining experience, maybe you guys touch on this a little bit, that you think affects you and you know, the way that you work and interact with others now? And do you have any closing words of advice for the current student body?
I did want to, so one thing, everyone up here won mayor, and I know we don't always all win. This is going off tangent just a bit, but in college, I also ran for student government. It's not called mayor, but it was something similar, and I did not win that. Which, the reason I wanted to mention that is because in my time in college, I became very passionate about environmental sustainability work. And it was interesting because when I lost, I had more time to work on the things I really cared about. And I actually create their first climate action plan my senior year. So I guess that was, I mean, it's kind of throwing it on its head being mayor here. But I wanted to point out that even if you don't win, it sometimes opens another much bigger door where you can really accomplish the kinds of things you want to accomplish.
Co-sign on that. So I can't even remember the question, but this is what I feel like I want to say though is that the thing that kind of in my everyday life that I think about, like what kind of Indian Springs helped me in terms of that, and it's more or less a question, I think, is because I literally was allowed to do everything. So took all these classes that I really had no real interest in. Took Latin because I might want to go to medical school at one point, took French because we had to, take the language, even though I ended up really enjoying French now. But it's one of these things where I was kind of forced to do things and had, you ask teenager Randall, what do you want to take? I wouldn't have taken any liberal arts classes at all. But when I look back at it, I had fun in a lot of classes. I had fun we had awesome math professors, teachers. But I really had fun with liberal arts classes. And I think the fact that I was more or less forced to do reading, even when I didn't want to do the reading, or even if I only did half of it, I still did more than most high school students in this country. It was like a really cool thing, and so it exposed me to so many things. And now, for my day-to-day, I really have an interdisciplinary practice where it's not just one area of the law. There's all sorts of things that I deal with, and I've been doing that since high school. Things that are not necessarily related, but I'm doing it, and you're able to do it, and English makes me that platform. So I would say enjoy, like music. I would never take music. Enjoy those kind of different experiences that you have. And I would challenge you to go to college to do the same thing. Kind of get yourself outside of your comfort zone because it's going to prepare you for the future.
Take it all in is my advice, but also don't take it too seriously. You get really deep in a hole sometimes here and just kind of back out. At the same time, one of the things that's really unique, you go to college, you go anywhere else, you're going to be in a much larger community. And the smallness of this place forces you to kind of interact with, we all have your cliques, but you got to interact with your cliques. And you don't get that in the larger world. So I hope you guys can appreciate that while you're here, because I've never been able to replicate Indian Springs body. I guess sometimes when I'm on the other side of a discussion and I realize it's the Indian Springs body, it scares the bejesus out of me. But it's the people that you meet here. You'll never get another chance to do it. So enjoy.
As alum, I think we all know this happens, but for the students, you're going to meet people in college and beyond who will talk about their high school years, and they'll talk about it with pain, right? Like during my formative years, I managed to get through high school, and we are so lucky because I believe there's a collective agreement that our high school helped us get through our formative years. And this place is unlike any place I have ever been or will ever go, but that foundation has set me for the rest of my life. Because there is a spiritual, a physical, a mental, ideological freedom here that is predicated on responsibility and is tethered to culpability for community and for each other without ever impending on our own independent thought or ability to communicate or to do what we want to do, but with respect to everyone around us so that we can continue to circle in this, what I think is sort of a utopia of sorts. And the reason we probably, none of us, I'm so thankful, remember the exact things we did as mayor at school. It reminds me of my favorite quote by Maya Angelou, who says, "People won't remember the things you said and they won't remember the things you did, but they'll remember the way you made them feel." I really don't remember everything I said at this school. I don't remember half the things I did. But I can tell you, I have never forgotten and will always carry the way Indian Springs made me feel about myself as an individual, as part of a community, as a leader, as a potential leader, as a lifelong learner through living. That's what you're going to take from here. And anyone who ever says that phrase, education is wasted on the young, they never went to Indian Springs.
One particularly impactful event here involved Dr. Cooper. We would have a essay, and I think it counted for half the grade that year. My friend Carl Silverstein got 99. I think that's the highest score Dr. Cooper would give. It was on the Renaissance. Of course, this was back in the typewriter days. And I put my heart and soul into it. Problem was I misspelled Renaissance. Essay. And I mean, every single time I spelled it wrong. The same way, so there was some consistency. So my advice, use spell check. And sometimes you just have to look back on some catastrophes and chuckle. It took me 20 years before I could chuckle about it because it was very scarring, but you spelled it.
Yes, I'll reiterate what Allison had to say. I think these experiences that you'll have here will resonate, throughout your lives. And I operate on a plane that paths crossing have purpose. So everyone you meet, whether it's in the dining hall, the staff, people that greet you at the guard gate, those people have meaning. So I think never lose sight that even your classmates will have something that will feed you and nurture you. So those are beautiful moments. So file those, and I ran into a student at the cafeteria dining hall, and I just made a point to journal your experiences, whether it's a small journal book or notes. I still have my graduation speech that, of course, my mother saved, and it's on a manila tablet. And I reflected on our move from Brazil, which I was leaving my friends at a pretty young age, and it says that, like I said earlier, you have to make it work. So you will make it work.
Well, I'll pretend this is advice, and it's cherish your memories because you'll have them forever. It's not advice because you can do that anyway. Also cherish your faculty for remembering, because as you witness here, you won't always have that so good. I think one thing you have looked forward to, we had our 50th reunion last year. And one of the most delightful things about it, this is something you have to look forward to also. Life back in 1970, when I was a student here, when I tried to be friendly to people, I tried to get to know people, but I had my cronies. Life was tribal in a lot of ways back then. Even in a place like Indian Springs, the tribes were friendly with each other, but I knew where my music was, I knew where the Dewey Brothers were coming out of campus, I knew where, and yet at our reunion, suddenly everybody became sort of equally interesting and wonderful to be around. And being in conversation with people that I passed by all the time, and not in an unfriendly way, but not in a very knowing way either. And I have become friends with some people that were not in my particular crowd then, that are friends of mine now, close. But that reunion was quite wonderful. And you have that to look forward to. So I do advise you to, you might go through a period of 10 years where you just feel like, I don't know, I'm not going to go back to Birmingham. The 11th year, you might have an opportunity to do it. Take it. I mean, don't ever leave the school if you are of a mind to stay put. But I think people miss out when they think that they don't want to come back to reunion, and they loved it here, but something about their lives in the present, and I've been through that, I know that feeling. But it's fun to be in touch with this school, and I'll leave you with I don't even know what it is, it's not advice, but something about the spirit of Indian Springs I do find really interesting. And there are other institutions that move throughout time, over time, that maintain a spirit, I don't doubt it. But whatever you feel the spirit of the school to be now, I mean, obviously you can't know if it's the same one that I felt, and I can't know that either. things change, times change, students change. But it really does seem, I mean, if any of this what we're saying resonates with you at all, that's kind of uncanny, it seems to me. And you'll be in a position to be thoughtful about that in years to come. When you come back for a 10th reunion and you're around the school and you see if you feel that. I suspect you will, but it's really something marvelous. And you have all that to look forward to.
One of the things we've heard over and over is this learning through living or lifelong learning. And I would say that's the most important thing that I got out of Indian Springs. And I think about the summer that my wife of 49 years, when we met, we got married after 10 weeks. And the question I often ask her, why would you marry me after 10 weeks? What were you thinking? And but when she doesn't say, well, if I'd known you any longer, I probably wouldn't have married you. But what she often does say is, you are fertile ground on which to grow. We are fertile ground on which to grow. And I think that's what Indian Springs gives you a basis of being fertile ground on which to grow. And I would never, I don't ever walk in here and wouldn't say something about Dr. Armstrong, who, you know, it still rings in my mind every day. Who are you? Where are you going? What forces shape you? Do you belong? And that still rings through my mind. And I think that's part of answering those questions, makes us fertile ground on which to grow.
Are you living in the shallows or in the depths? I think the finest teaching I've ever experienced was here, and that had perhaps the most impact on me. Teaching's a tough thing. I'm not a teacher, but I'm married to it. It's a very good one. Who teaches me all the time. We actually were dating when I was at Indian Springs, which is a little scary. We've only been married for 58 years. So it started a long time ago, but I not only learned something about teaching, but I learned something about teaching by being married to one. The quality and the character of that stands out to me. I've also, because I've been associated with the school for so long, I've also tried to reflect on what I believe the purpose of this place is, and is it still living up to that purpose? I can't answer that, but perhaps those of you who are still students here can. But my sense of what Indian Springs is all about has always been that it had three fundamental things that it was trying to do to us, for us. One was to instill a love of the Lord. We've heard all about that. But that's very, very important as you get along in the world after you leave school, is a love of learning. I think the second thing was some sense of integrity and moral courage. Understanding what the difference between right and wrong is in there as well. And the third was, again, you've heard it discussed, some sort of ethic of participatory citizenship. Learning through living. And I think that's always what has made Indian Springs rather unique. And the extent to which it is still trying to live up to that mission, or something akin to it, then it will always be a valuable place for young minds to be nurtured.
Well, being here today. That was amazing. We learned a lot from you guys. You can give these guys a round of applause.